The scent of lilies and jasmine filled the small back room of the chapel, mingling with the sharp bite of hairspray and my own nervous sweat. Outside, October rain tapped against stained glass windows, casting kaleidoscope shadows across the worn wooden floor. I stared at my reflection, barely recognizing the woman before me. The white dress, simple but elegant, hugged my frame in a way that made me look almost ethereal. My mother's pearls rested cool against my collarbone. "Emma, hold still," my best friend Sophia murmured, pins between her lips as she made a final adjustment to my veil. "Perfect. You look perfect." Perfect. The word echoed in my head, hollow and uncertain. I should have felt perfect. This was supposed to be perfect. Daniel was perfect. Kind, stable, loving. The decent man I'd always dreamed would save me from the chaos of my childhood. The man who'd never raise his voice or disappear for days. The man who'd promised me normalcy, security, a future without fear. So why couldn't I breathe? 5 minutes, ladies. The wedding coordinator's cheerful voice pierced through the door, sending a jolt of panic through my chest. "I need some air," I whispered, my voice barely audible over the crescendo of my heartbeat. Sophia's brow furrowed with concern. "Emma, you can't go outside. It's pouring, and everyone's already seated. Just 1 minute, please." Before she could protest further, I slipped out the side door into a narrow stone corridor that led to a small garden courtyard. The ancient chapel had been Daniel's idea. Historical, traditional, the perfect setting for the beginning of our conventional life together. I gulped at the damp air, my hands trembling as I lifted my skirt to avoid the puddles forming on the flagstones. The rain had eased to a gentle mist, cool against my flushed skin. Water droplets clung to the roses and ivy that climbed the courtyard walls, glistening like tiny diamonds. Behind me, music began to swell from within the chapel. The processional. I had minutes, maybe seconds. Not exactly the behavior of an eager bride. The voice cut through the garden like a blade, low, smooth, with the faintest trace of an accent I couldn't place. I spun around, my dress swirling around my ankles, to find a man standing beneath the covered portico. He wasn't supposed to be here. This area was private, reserved only for the bridal party. Yet there he stood, utterly out of place, yet somehow looking as though he owned every stone in the courtyard. Tall, imposingly so, dressed in a suit that even I could tell cost more than my entire wedding. Black, immaculately tailored to broad shoulders and a lean frame. No tie, just an open collar revealing a sliver of tanned skin. But it was his eyes that froze me in place. Dark, almost black in the dim light, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Not with fear, though perhaps it should have been, with something else. Something I didn't want to name. "I'm sorry," I managed, hating the way my voice wavered. "This area is private. The ceremony is about to start." His lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "I know." 2 simple words, yet delivered with such certainty that they felt like a threat. He stepped forward, emerging fully from the shadows, and I noticed the subtle movement behind him. Another man, larger, standing at a respectful distance, eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. "You don't remember me." Not a question, but a statement, laced with amusement. I shook my head, even as something tugged at the edges of my memory. Had we met? I would have remembered those eyes, that presence. 12 years ago. "You were 16, working after school at that little Italian place on Mulberry Street." He moved closer, each step deliberate. "Tony's." The name unlocked something, a flash of memory. The cramped, chaotic restaurant where I'd waitressed to help my mother pay rent after my father disappeared. The corner table that was always reserved, though rarely occupied. And the one night it was. A celebration of some kind. Men in expensive suits. Too much wine. Too many whispers. "You dropped a tray of drinks," he continued, now close enough that I could smell his cologne, something woodsy and expensive, all over a very important associate of mine. My stomach dropped. Mr. Russo's birthday dinner. The words came out barely above a whisper. His eyes flashed with something like approval. "She remembers. How could I forget?" I'd been fired on the spot, despite it being an accident caused by one of the men grabbing my wrist as I served. I'd gone home in tears, terrified about how we'd make rent that month. The next day, mysteriously, I'd been rehired with a raise. I never knew why. "Alessio Vitale," he said, extending a hand as though this were a normal introduction on a normal day. The name hit me like a physical blow. Everyone in our neighborhood knew that name, spoke it in whispers if they spoke it at all. The Vitale family owned half the city, legally or otherwise. I'd grown up with warnings to cross the street if I saw certain men approaching, to never mention certain names. I didn't take his hand. "What are you doing here?" Inside, I could hear the wedding march beginning. Daniel would be waiting at the altar. My absence would already be causing whispers. "I've come to stop a mistake." His voice was soft but firm, his eyes never leaving mine. "What mistake?" "Your marriage to Daniel Foster." My blood ran cold. "You don't know anything about me or Daniel." Something darkened in his expression. "I know everything about Daniel Foster. Harvard Law. Junior partner at Morris & Bell, son of Judge William Foster. Currently drowning in gambling debts to people who don't offer payment plans. The world tilted beneath my feet. "What are you talking about?" "Your perfect fiancé owes my family close to $700,000, Alessio said, as casually as commenting on the weather. "A debt he's been unable to pay." "That's not possible," I whispered. Though even as the words left my mouth, puzzle pieces started shifting in my mind. Daniel's recent distraction, the calls he'd taken in another room, the inexplicable cash withdrawals from our joint account that he'd explained away as wedding expenses. "He found a solution, though," Alessio continued, pulling something from his jacket pocket. "A small velvet box. Your grandmother's ring, the one with the sapphires and diamonds. Family heirloom, isn't it?" My hand flew instinctively to my neck, where the necklace made from one of those sapphires rested against my skin. The ring had disappeared months ago. Daniel had helped me search the apartment for days before we'd concluded it must have been stolen during a showing when we were selling my old place. "How do you have that?" My voice sounded strange to my own ears, distant and hollow. "He traded it, part payment. Not nearly enough, but sentimental value," he said. Alessio's mouth twisted with disgust. He thought I wouldn't recognize the Calloway family jewels. The name, my mother's maiden name, spoken in his mouth sent another shock through me. "You knew my family?" Something shifted in his expression, too quick to read. "Your grandfather and my father had business together, a long time ago. The music inside the chapel had reached its climax. Any moment, someone would come looking for me. Whatever Daniel owes you, it has nothing to do with me." I tried to sound firm, but my voice betrayed me, cracking on the last word. "That's where you're wrong, Emma." The way he said my name, like he'd been saying it for years, like it belonged to him somehow, sent an involuntary shiver down my spine. "Daniel Foster is marrying you to save himself. That's ridiculous. We've been together for 2 years. 2 years. Since exactly 3 days after he placed his first bet with one of my establishments." Alessio stepped closer, and this time I couldn't make myself back away. "Did you never wonder why a man from his background, with his connections, would pursue a girl from your neighborhood? A girl with no family money, no connections?" "Because he loves me," I said automatically, but the words rang hollow even to my own ears. Alessio's laugh was soft, almost pitying. "He researched you, found out about your family's history with mine. Thought marrying a Calloway might offer him protection. My family has no history with yours." But even as I protested, memories surfaced. My mother's rigid rules about certain parts of town, her panic when I'd mentioned the job at Tony's, the way she'd refused to explain why we never spoke to my grandfather despite living only miles away. "Your grandfather was my father's consigliere for 20 years, Alessio said quietly, until he betrayed him. The debt was supposed to die with him, but some things carry forward." The door to the corridor burst open, and Sophia's panicked face appeared. "Emma, everyone's waiting. What are you—" Her words died as she saw I wasn't alone. Her eyes widened, darting between me and Alessio, recognition and fear flooding her features. "Tell them the bride needs a moment," Alessio said without looking at her, his tone making it clear it wasn't a request. To my shock, Sophia nodded, and retreated without question, the door closing behind her with a soft click. "You can't do this," I whispered, tears threatening to spill over. "You can't just appear on my wedding day and—" "I can do whatever I want, Emma." There was no malice in his voice, just simple fact. "But right now I'm giving you a choice." "What choice?" "Walk into that chapel. Marry a man who's using you as a shield, who's already sold your family heirlooms to cover his debts. Begin a life built entirely on lies." He held out the velvet box containing my grandmother's ring. "Or leave with me, now, and I'll consider Daniel's debt paid in full." "You're insane," I breathed, even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "I don't even know you." "But I know you," he countered. "I've known you since you were 16 years old, standing in that restaurant with fire in your eyes even as they fired you unjustly. You were watching me? All this time?" Something flickered across his face. Possessiveness, perhaps, or something deeper. "I protected you. Made sure you got your job back, made sure you got into NYU despite the scholarship mysteriously being awarded to the mayor's niece instead." My acceptance letter flashed through my mind, arriving weeks after I'd received a rejection, the school citing a clerical error in their previous communication. "Why?" I demanded, anger finally breaking through my shock. "Why would you do that?" "Because you remind me of someone I couldn't save." His voice roughened, revealing the first crack in his controlled demeanor. "And because 12 years ago, you looked at me, really looked at me, without fear or greed in your eyes. Do you know how rare that is in my world?" A commotion rose from inside the chapel, raised voices, a crash. Alessio didn't flinch, didn't even look toward the sound. "He knows I'm here," he said simply, "and now he's trying to run." As if on cue, the side door burst open, and Daniel appeared, his face ashen, wedding boutonniere askew. He froze when he saw us together, his eyes widening with unmistakable terror. "Emma," he gasped, "come inside. Now." I looked at the man I'd planned to marry, seeing him clearly for perhaps the first time. The perfect facade had cracked, revealing something desperate and calculating underneath. "Is it true?" I asked quietly. "About the gambling debts? About my grandmother's ring?" Daniel's face contorted. "Whatever he told you is a lie. He's a criminal, Emma. A murderer." "I've never denied what I am," Alessio said calmly. "Can you say the same, Mr. Foster?" Daniel's gaze darted between us, then over his shoulder, calculating. "Emma, please, we need to leave. Now." "The police won't help you," Alessio said, almost gently. "Judge Foster has already been informed of his son's indiscretions, including the money missing from his firm's client accounts." Daniel lunged forward suddenly, grabbing my arm with bruising force. "You're coming with me." The pain of his grip shocked me, so different from the gentle touches I'd grown accustomed to. Before I could react, Daniel was on the ground, Alessio's bodyguard standing over him, having appeared from nowhere to intervene. "Don't touch her again," Alessio said, his voice deadly quiet. Daniel scrambled backward, crab-like. "You can have the money. I'll find a way to pay. Just let me go." "The debt was $700,000 this morning," Alessio replied. "It's higher now." "How much higher?" Daniel's voice cracked. Alessio looked at me, then back at Daniel. "Everything you have. Everything you'll ever have." Understanding dawned on Daniel's face. "This isn't about money. It's about her." He turned to me, desperation making him reckless. "Emma, he's obsessed with you. Has been for years. Ask him why he really had you rehired at that restaurant. Why he kept tabs on you. Ask him about the men who tried to date you who suddenly backed off." My mind raced through a parade of brief relationships, all ending mysteriously, often with the men simply disappearing from my life without explanation. "Is that true?" I asked, turning to Alessio. He didn't deny it. "I removed obstacles, men who weren't worthy of you. You had no right," I whispered, anger building. "I had every right," he countered. "Your grandfather promised you to my family before you were even born. A blood debt to be paid when you came of age." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. "I don't believe you. Ask your mother why she ran away with your father. Why she changed her name. Why she never spoke of her family. His eyes held mine, unflinching. Ask her about the pact between the Callaways and the Vitalis. Sounds from the chapel grew louder. Confused guests, raised voices. My perfect day was unraveling, and with it, the carefully constructed fiction of my life. Emma, Daniel pleaded, getting to his feet. We can still fix this. We can run. Run? I repeated, the word tasting bitter. With what money, Daniel? The money you stole from clients? The money you gambled away? Or were you planning to sell the rest of my grandmother's jewelry too? His silence was all the confirmation I needed. Time to choose, Emma, Alessio said quietly. Him or me. Those aren't real options, I said, feeling trapped between two impossibilities. They're the only options, Alessio replied. But if it helps? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded document, offering it to me. I've had my lawyers prepare this. A contract, if you will. I took it with trembling hands, scanning the legal language. It was a protection agreement, promising Daniel's debts would be erased, that he would face no physical harm, that my mother would receive a substantial monthly payment for the rest of her life, that I would be free to leave Alessio's protection after 1 year if I chose to. Why would you offer this? I asked, suspicious. Because I want you to come willingly, he said simply. Not out of fear. And if I choose Daniel? Alessio's expression hardened. Then I collect his debt in the traditional way. And you? His eyes swept over me, lingering on my face. You live with the consequences of choosing a liar. The chapel door opened again, and my mother appeared, her face draining of color when she saw Alessio. No, she whispered, reaching for me. Emma, come inside, now. Mom? I'd never seen such naked fear in her eyes. Do you know him? She didn't answer, but her silence spoke volumes. Mrs. Calloway, Alessio greeted her with a respectful nod. Or do you still prefer Mrs. Parker? You promised, my mother said, her voice shaking. Your father promised it was over when Dad died. And it would have been, Alessio agreed, if not for Mr. Foster here, who tried to use your daughter as leverage against my family. My mother turned to Daniel, betrayal flashing across her face. What have you done? Ask your daughter who she chooses, Alessio said softly. The man who lied to her, or the man who has protected her from the shadows all these years. I looked between them, Daniel, disheveled and desperate, my mother, terrified and broken, and Alessio, dark and dangerous, but somehow, impossibly, the only one who seemed to be offering me any semblance of truth. The wedding dress suddenly felt like a costume, the pearls like a collar. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my past, my future, had been a carefully constructed lie. I took a step back from all of them, my mind racing. I had spent my entire life seeking safety, stability, normalcy, the things my chaotic childhood had denied me. And now, I was being offered a choice between a false version of those things with Daniel or stepping willingly into the dark world my mother had tried so desperately to shield me from. If I go with you, I said to Alessio, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. What happens then? Something like triumph flickered in his eyes. Then you become mine to protect, officially. I'm not a possession. No, he agreed, you're a Calloway. And in our world, that means something far more valuable. Rain began to fall again, harder now, drumming against the stones. Inside the chapel, confusion had given way to an eerie silence. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Whether police or ambulance, I couldn't tell. I looked down at the ruined silk of my wedding dress, at the contract in my hands, at the velvet box containing my grandmother's ring that Alessio still held. And I made my choice. The rain soaked through my wedding dress as I stepped toward Alessio, the silk growing heavy against my skin. My choice hung in the air between us. Unspoken, but understood, his dark eyes gleamed with something dangerous. Satisfaction, possession, triumph. Emma, don't, my mother pleaded, her voice breaking. You don't know what you're doing. I turned to her, this woman who had raised me on half-truths and carefully constructed fictions. And whose fault is that? You never told me about our family, about the Vitales, about any of this. I was protecting you, she whispered. No, you were hiding me. The realization crystallized in that moment, sharp and painful. And now look where we are. Daniel lunged forward, desperation making him reckless. Emma, please. We can still fix this. I'll find another way to pay him back. There is no other way, Alessio said coolly. His bodyguard shifted slightly, a subtle reminder of the power imbalance at play. The contract, Emma. I looked down at the document in my hands, now spotted with raindrops that made the ink bleed in places. 1 year. I would be bound to him for 1 year. And then, if I chose to, I could walk away if I survived that year. I need a pen, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. My mother made a soft, broken sound, but didn't try to stop me. She knew better than anyone what refusing would mean. Alessio produced a sleek silver pen from his pocket. The metal was cool against my rain-dampened fingers as I signed my name, Emma Louise Parker, on the line at the bottom of the page. As I did, I felt something fundamental shift within me, as though I were signing away not just a year of my life, but some essential part of myself. A wise choice, Alessio murmured, taking the contract and pen back, his fingers brushing mine deliberately. Emma, please, Daniel began, but I cut him off. Enough, Daniel. I looked at the man I'd almost married, seeing him now for what he truly was, a coward using me as a shield. You lied to me from the beginning. You never loved me. You just thought my name would save you. That's not true, he protested. But the denial rang hollow even to his own ears. It started that way, maybe, but I did fall in love with you. I shook my head, feeling oddly calm now that the decision had been made. Love doesn't sell family heirlooms behind someone's back. Love doesn't gamble away a future. I slipped my engagement ring off my finger and held it out to him. This is yours. I don't want anything from you. Daniel stared at the ring, then at me, realization dawning that he had truly lost. The debt is considered paid, Alessio said to Daniel, his tone making it clear the conversation was over. But if you ever approach Emma again, our arrangement will be void. The sirens grew louder, close now. Alessio nodded to his bodyguard, who spoke quietly into a phone I hadn't noticed before. Our car is waiting, Alessio said to me. We should leave before the police arrive. The police, I repeated, suddenly remembering that there were over 100 guests inside the chapel, waiting for a wedding that would never happen. An unfortunate incident at the altar, Alessio explained. One of the groomsmen became violent, had to be restrained. The ceremony will have to be postponed indefinitely. You orchestrated a distraction, I realized. The faintest smile touched his lips. I plan for contingencies. He held out his hand to me. This time I took it. His skin was warm despite the rain, his grip firm, but not painful, nothing like Daniel's bruising grasp moments earlier. I felt a strange electric current pass between us, a recognition of something I couldn't name. As we walked toward the garden gate, I turned back one last time. My mother stood frozen, tears streaming down her face. Daniel had collapsed onto a stone bench, head in his hands. Mom, I called softly. I'll be in touch. She nodded, understanding the unspoken message. I would be safe, at least for now. The black car waiting outside the garden gate was exactly what I'd expected. Sleek, expensive, with windows tinted so dark they looked opaque. The driver stood beside it, impassive in the rain, holding an umbrella that he immediately extended over me as we approached. Thank you, I murmured, the simple courtesy feeling absurd given the circumstances. The driver nodded, opening the rear door. Alessio guided me inside with a light touch at the small of my back, his hand burning through the wet fabric of my dress. The interior was all soft leather, and the subtle scent of expensive cologne, his scent, I realized, already familiar to me. As the door closed, sealing us into a cocoon of quiet luxury, the full weight of what I'd done crashed over me. I'd walked away from my wedding, from the life I'd planned, from everything safe and known. I'd chosen to go with a man I barely knew, a man whose very name had been whispered with fear throughout my childhood. You're shaking, Alessio observed as the car pulled smoothly away from the curb. I'm soaking wet and it's October, I replied, deflecting. Of course I'm cold. Without a word, he shrugged out of his jacket and draped it around my shoulders. The wool was warm from his body, heavy and oddly comforting. Where are we going? I asked, watching through the window as the chapel disappeared from view. Somewhere safe, he answered. Somewhere we can talk properly. The contract said I'd have my own place. His eyes met mine, unreadable in the dim light of the car. And you will. But first we need to address more immediate concerns, such as the fact that you're a runaway bride whose wedding was just disrupted by violence, and half the city's social elite witnessed it. His tone was matter of fact. The press will be all over this by nightfall. I hadn't thought of that. Daniel's family was prominent enough that our wedding had been mentioned in the society pages. A scandal like this wouldn't stay quiet. What's your solution? We control the narrative, Alessio said simply, before anyone else can. The car turned onto a wide avenue, heading toward the wealthier part of the city. Buildings grew more elegant, streets cleaner, pedestrians better dressed. This was a world I'd only glimpsed through Daniel, never quite belonging to it. And what narrative is that? I asked, wariness creeping back into my voice. Alessio studied me for a long moment. That depends on what you want, Emma. What I want? I almost laughed. I don't think that matters anymore. It matters to me. His voice was unexpectedly gentle. The contract guarantees your safety and comfort. Beyond that, the story we tell the world is your choice. I stared at him, searching for deception. You're giving me options? Within parameters, he qualified. We can say you discovered your fiancé's gambling problem and called off the wedding, or that old family connections, mine, made you reconsider your choice, or simply that you realized you were making a mistake. All lies, I noted. Half-truths, he corrected. The best kind of deception. I looked down at my ruined wedding dress, at the pearls still circling my neck. And what about us? What story do we tell about that? Something darkened in his gaze. That's entirely up to you, Emma. You've orchestrated all of this, I said, sudden anger flaring. You've manipulated my life from the shadows for years, and now you're claiming to give me choices? Yes. No defense, no justification, just simple acknowledgement. Why? Why me? Why now? Alessio leaned forward slightly. Because you were promised to me a long time ago, and I've waited long enough. The blunt honesty stunned me into silence. The car slowed, turning into a private driveway guarded by an imposing iron gate that opened as we approached. Beyond it stood a mansion that made Daniel's family home look modest by comparison. Stone and glass, modern yet somehow timeless, set among carefully manicured grounds. My home, Alessio said, watching my reaction. For tonight, at least. I'm not sleeping with you, I said immediately, the words bursting from me before I could consider them. To my surprise, he laughed, a genuine sound of amusement that transformed his face, making him look younger, almost approachable. I don't recall proposing that, Emma. Heat rushed to my cheeks. I just wanted to be clear. Crystal clear, he agreed, amusement still lingering in his eyes. You'll have your own quarters, with a lock, if it makes you feel safer. The car stopped at the front entrance, where another man in a dark suit waited beneath a large umbrella. Alessio exited first, then extended his hand to help me out. This time, I hesitated only briefly before taking it. The house was even more impressive inside. Soaring ceilings, art that I suspected was original and priceless, furnishings that spoke of old money and refined taste. Nothing ostentatious, nothing gaudy. Just quiet, confident wealth. Your dress is ruined, Alessio observed as we stood in the vast foyer. Maria will show you to your room. She'll help you find something else to wear. As if summoned by his words, an older woman appeared, her gray hair pulled back in a severe bun, her expression politely neutral as she took in the sight of me in my sodden wedding gown. This is Emma, Alessio said to her. She'll be staying with us. Maria nodded, no surprise registering on her face. Of course, Mr. Vitale. If you'll come with me, miss. I hesitated, suddenly reluctant to leave Alessio's side. As terrifying as he was the only familiar element in this strange new reality. Go, he said softly. Get dry, rest. We'll talk over dinner." "I'm not hungry," I lied, though I suddenly realized I hadn't eaten all day, too nervous about the wedding. "Nevertheless," he replied, 7 o'clock. It wasn't a request. I followed Maria up a sweeping staircase, feeling Alessio's eyes on me until I disappeared from view. The room she led me to was larger than the entire apartment I'd shared with Daniel. Decorated in soft blues and creams, it had the feel of a luxury hotel suite rather than a bedroom. Impersonal, yet perfectly comfortable. "The bathroom is through there," Maria indicated a door. "I'll bring you some clothes. Do you have any preferences?" I almost laughed at the absurdity of the question. "Something warm and dry." She nodded, unfazed by my sarcasm. "There's a robe in the bathroom. I'll return shortly." When she was gone, I stood alone in the center of the room, water pooling at my feet from my ruined dress. My wedding dress. The weight of reality crashed over me in waves. I'd walked away from my wedding. I'd agreed to a year with a man who was, by all accounts, dangerous. I'd discovered my entire life had been built on secrets I never knew existed. Slowly, methodically, I began to remove the trappings of the bride I would never be. The veil, the pearls, the tiny crystal pins in my hair. I laid them on the dresser, a memorial to the future that had died today. In the bathroom, I finally stepped out of the dress, leaving it in a sad heap of silk and lace on the marble floor. The hot shower that followed was both blessing and curse, washing away the physical discomfort while giving me time to think, to doubt, to fear. By the time I emerged, wrapped in the promised robe, Maria had returned. Laid out on the bed were not the casual clothes I'd expected, but a simple black dress, elegant, and obviously expensive. "Mr. Vitale thought this might suit you," she said, gesturing to the dress. "There are more casual options in the closet if you prefer." I stared at the dress, understanding the message behind it. This was my first test. Accept his choice, or defy it. I ran my fingers over the black dress, feeling the expensive fabric beneath my fingertips. Silk, or something similarly luxurious. The cut was modest yet elegant. High neckline, fitted waist, knee length. Nothing provocative or inappropriate, just beautiful in its simplicity. "Did he pick this himself?" I asked Maria, trying to keep my tone neutral. Something flickered across her stoic expression. Perhaps amusement. "Mr. Vitale is very particular about certain things." I considered my options. I could refuse the dress, assert some small independence in this situation where I had so little control, or I could choose my battles more wisely. "I'll wear it," I decided, taking the dress from the bed. "Thank you." Maria nodded approvingly. "The shoes are in the closet. I'll return to escort you to dinner at 6:50. When she left, I dressed slowly, my muscles aching with tension. The dress fit perfectly, as though it had been made for me. I wondered uneasily if it had been. How long had Alessio been planning this day? The shoes, elegant black heels, also fit flawlessly. I found a hairdryer in the bathroom and did my best with my hair, letting it fall in loose waves past my shoulders. In the mirror, I looked like a stranger. Not the bride I'd been hours earlier. Not the woman who had planned a safe, predictable life with Daniel. Someone else entirely. Someone with secrets in her eyes. Precisely at 6:50, Maria knocked and entered, her gaze sweeping over me with approval. "Mr. Vitale is waiting in the dining room," she said, leading me back downstairs and through the maze-like corridors of the mansion. The dining room was smaller than I'd expected, intimate even, with a table set for just two. Candles flickered in silver holders, casting warm light across fine china and crystal. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the rain had stopped, leaving the gardens glistening in the twilight. Alessio stood as I entered, his dark eyes taking me in with unconcealed appreciation. He'd changed as well, into a crisp white shirt and dark trousers, casual yet immaculate. "The dress suits you," he said. As I took the seat a server pulled out for me. "You seem very confident about my size," I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. His lips curved slightly. "I pay attention to details." "That's not creepy at all. In my world, Emma, attention to detail is the difference between life and death." He gestured to a server who immediately poured wine into my glass. "I hope you don't mind." I took the liberty of choosing the menu. Of course he had. Do I have a choice? Always, he said, surprising me. You can eat or not eat, drink or not drink, speak or remain silent. The choices may be constrained, but they are always yours. I took a sip of the wine. Rich, complex, undoubtedly expensive. Limited choices aren't real choices. All choices are limited by circumstance, he countered. Even before today, your choices were shaped by forces you didn't understand. The difference now is that you're aware of them. The first course arrived, something delicate involving scallops that under normal circumstances I would have appreciated. Now, despite my hunger, each bite felt like a concession. Tell me about the blood debt, I said after several minutes of tense silence. The one you claim my grandfather owed your family. Alessio studied me over the rim of his wine glass. You don't believe me. I believe my mother was terrified when she saw you, I replied. I believe Daniel used me. Beyond that. I shrugged. I grew up being told to avoid men like you. Forgive me if I'm skeptical about suddenly being told I belong in your world. Fair enough. He set down his glass. Your grandfather, Thomas Calloway, worked for my father for nearly 20 years. He was trusted, respected, family, in every way that matters in our circles. And what circles are those exactly? I interrupted. Let's not dance around it. You're talking about organized crime, the Mafia. His expression didn't change. I prefer to think of it as an alternative business structure with its own governance and justice system. Despite everything, I almost laughed. That's one way of putting it. Your grandfather was my father's consigliere, his advisor, his right hand, Alessio continued, ignoring my interruption. When my father was killed, Thomas was with him. He survived but failed to protect my father. I frowned. That doesn't sound like a betrayal. That sounds like a tragedy. Something flickered in his eyes, surprise perhaps. Most would assume the worst. I'm not most people. No, he agreed softly. You're not. The server cleared our plates, replacing them with the main course. Some kind of roast with vegetables I couldn't identify in the dim light. In our world, Alessio continued after the server had retreated. Such a failure demands retribution. Blood for blood. But my father had left instructions. Thomas was to be spared, on one condition. Let me guess, I said, a chill running through me. Me? Alessio nodded. A marriage alliance between our families. His granddaughter to the Vitale heir. That's medieval, I protested. And I was what, a baby? Not even born yet, he confirmed. Your mother was pregnant with you when the pact was made. When she learned of it, she ran, took your father and disappeared, changed your name from Calloway to Parker. My appetite vanished. And my grandfather agreed to this? To trading his unborn granddaughter? He agreed to save his own life, and the lives of his daughter and son-in-law. Alessio's tone was matter of fact. It was a different time, Emma. The rules were clear to everyone involved. Except to me, I said bitterly. No one thought to mention any of this to me. Would you have believed it? He asked, his gaze intense. If your mother had told you as a child that you were promised to a man like me? I pushed my plate away, suddenly nauseous. So what? You've been waiting all these years to collect on this sick bargain? Following me, manipulating my life from a distance? Protecting you, he corrected. Ensuring you had opportunities, making sure you were safe, until you decided it was time to claim your prize. My voice shook with anger. Alessio's expression hardened. I would have left you alone, let you live your life, marry Foster, disappear into suburban mediocrity. But he forced my hand when he tried to use you as leverage. What do you mean, use me as leverage? He approached one of my associates a month ago, Alessio explained. Said he was marrying a Calloway, that the old debts should be forgiven once you were his wife, that your grandfather's protection would extend to him. I stared at him, disbelieving. Daniel knew about all this? Not the details. Just enough to be dangerous. Alessio's voice was cold. He learned your mother's maiden name, did some digging. Found out enough to think he could use the connection. The room seemed to tilt around me. Daniel had known. Had sought me out because of my family name, a name I didn't even use, had pursued me, wooed me, proposed to me, all as part of some twisted scheme to protect himself. So you what? I demanded. Decided to take me instead? To punish him? I decided to give you the truth, Alessio replied evenly. And a choice. Some choice, I muttered. Marry a liar or go with a dangerous stranger. I'm hardly a stranger, Emma. His voice softened. I've known you since you were 16. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. I know you love thunderstorms, but are afraid of lightning. I know you visit your father's grave every year on his birthday, even though he abandoned you. Each word was like a physical blow. How could you possibly know all that? I told you. I pay attention to details. You had me watched. It wasn't a question. Protected. He corrected again. There's a difference. Not from where I'm sitting. I pushed back my chair, suddenly desperate for air. I'd like to go back to my room now. Alessio studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Of course. Maria will. I can find my own way, I interrupted, already standing. No, you can't, he replied calmly. This house is designed to be confusing to outsiders. A security measure. Of course it was. Everything about this man, this place, was designed for control and security. I sank back into my chair, suddenly exhausted. Why did you wait so long? I asked. The question that had been nagging at me since the chapel. If I was promised to you years ago, why wait until now? Until my wedding day to someone else? Alessio was silent for so long I thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice was quieter than before, almost reflective. I wanted you to have a life first. An education. Experiences. He twirled the stem of his wineglass between his fingers. I wanted you to come to me as a woman, not a girl, and... He hesitated. I wanted you to choose me, however limited that choice might be, but I didn't choose you, I reminded him. I chose to escape Daniel. Something dangerous flashed in his eyes. For now, that's enough. The implication hung in the air between us. That someday, he expected more. That this year specified in our contract was just the beginning. I'd like to go to my room now, I said again, my voice steadier than I felt. This time he nodded and rose, but instead of calling for Maria, he himself came around the table and pulled out my chair. I'll escort you. The walk back through the house was silent, tense. I was acutely aware of his presence beside me, of the controlled power in his movements, of the way servants we passed lowered their eyes respectfully. This was a man accustomed to command, to being obeyed without question. At my door he paused. I have business to attend to tomorrow. Maria will show you around the grounds if you wish. The house is yours to explore, except for the east wing. That's my private office and security area. Bluebeard's castle, I murmured. With forbidden rooms. His lips quirked. Not quite so dramatic, I assure you. Just boring business matters and security protocols. When will I see my mother? When it's safe, he replied. Daniel has been taken care of, but there may be others who would use your family connections against me. Give it a few days for things to settle. I nodded, too tired to argue. Good night, then. I reached for the door handle, but his hand caught mine, gentle but firm. The contact sent an unexpected jolt through me, a current of something I refused to name. Emma, he said, his voice low, I know this isn't what you planned for your life. I know today has been difficult. But I want you to understand something. I looked up at him, caught in his intense gaze. I will never lie to you, he continued. I may not always tell you everything, but what I do tell you will be truth. That's more than Foster ever offered you. The worst part was, I believed him. Whatever else Alessio Vitale might be, dangerous, controlling, obsessive, I sensed he valued truth in his own way. Good night, Alessio, I said softly, withdrawing my hand from his. He stepped back, giving me space. Sweet dreams, Emma. Inside my room, I locked the door, testing whether his promise of choice extended even to this small act of defiance. The lock held. No one tried to enter. In this luxurious prison, it seemed I did have some measure of privacy, at least. I changed out of the black dress, hanging it carefully in the closet that was already filled with clothes in my size. Another unsettling reminder of how thoroughly Alessio had prepared for my arrival. I found silk pajamas laid out on the bed, but ignored them in favor of a simple t-shirt and shorts I discovered in a drawer. As I lay in the enormous bed, staring at shadows on the ceiling, I thought about the bizarre turns my life had taken in a single day. This morning, I had been a bride preparing to marry a man I thought I knew. Tonight, I was effectively the captive of a man I barely knew, but who apparently knew everything about me. And somewhere in the tangle of fear, anger, and confusion, there was a treacherous spark of curiosity. Who exactly was Alessio Vitale? And what did he truly want from me? Morning came with disorienting brightness. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was, the bed too soft, the room too quiet. Then reality crashed back, not on my honeymoon, not Mrs. Daniel Foster. Instead, I was in Alessio Vitale's mansion, bound by a contract and centuries-old blood debt. A soft knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts. "Come in," I called, sitting up and pulling the covers around me. Maria entered carrying a tray. "Good morning, Miss Emma. I've brought breakfast." "Thank you, but I could have come downstairs," I said, surprised by the service. "Mr. Vitale thought you might prefer privacy this morning." She placed the tray on a small table by the window. "He left early on business but asked me to give you this." She handed me an envelope. Inside was a note written in elegant, confident handwriting. "Emma, business requires my attention today. Maria will see to your needs. The house and grounds are yours to explore, with the exception we discussed. Your personal items have been collected from your apartment and will arrive this afternoon. If there is anything specific you require, Maria will arrange it." Simple, direct, almost impersonal, yet the fact that he'd thought to retrieve my belongings showed consideration I hadn't expected. "What kind of business?" I asked, though I doubted Maria would tell me. She arranged the breakfast dishes with practiced efficiency. "Mr. Vitale oversees many legitimate enterprises. Import, export, real estate, hospitality, among others." "And the illegitimate ones?" I pressed. Maria's expression remained impassive. "I wouldn't know about such matters, miss." "Of course not. How long have you worked for him?" "I served his father before him," she replied. "I've known Mr. Alessio since he was born. I tried a different approach." "What's he like?" "Really like, not just the scary boss act." Something softened in her eyes. "Mr. Vitale is a fair employer and a loyal friend. He remembers birthdays. He visits his mother every Sunday. He has never raised his voice to the staff." She poured coffee into a delicate cup. "He is a man of his word, miss. That is rare in any world." I absorbed this, trying to reconcile it with the dangerous man who had upended my life yesterday. "And the other women?" Maria paused. "Other women?" "The ones before me," I clarified. "I can't be the first he's brought here. Mr. Vitale is a private person," she said carefully. "His personal matters are his own." Not the answer I was fishing for. Either there had been many women, or none important enough for the staff to remember. Neither option comforted me. After breakfast, I showered and dressed in clothes I found in the closet. Simple jeans and a sweater that, unsettlingly, were exactly my style and size. I explored the mansion cautiously, feeling like an intruder despite Alessio's permission. The house was even more impressive by daylight. Sunlight streamed through massive windows, illuminating art pieces that belonged in museums. Every room was meticulously decorated, nothing flashy or ostentatious, just quiet elegance that spoke of old money and refined taste. I found a library that made my heart skip. Floor-to-ceiling shelves filled with everything from leather-bound classics to modern bestsellers. Running my fingers along the spines, I noticed many were first editions. A fortune in books alone. "He collects them," a voice said behind me. I turned to find an older man in a dark suit standing in the doorway. Unlike the security personnel I'd glimpsed, he had a gentler presence, more scholar than soldier. "I'm Thomas," he said, inclining his head slightly. "Mr. Vitale's advisor. You must be Emma." "His advisor?" I repeated, thinking of what Alessio had told me about my grandfather's role as consigliere. "Among other things," Thomas acknowledged with a small smile. "I also manage the library. Do you read much, Miss Emma?" "When I can," I replied, still wary. "I studied English literature at NYU." "Ah, yes." His eyes twinkled. The scholarship situation, one of Alessio's more creative interventions. So they all knew. Everyone in this house knew more about my life than I did myself. "Did you know my grandfather?" I asked suddenly. "The original Thomas Calloway?" His expression sobered. "I did. He was a good man in a difficult position. Much like you find yourself now." "I'm nothing like him," I said sharply. "I didn't choose any of this, didn't you?" he asked mildly. "You signed the contract. You chose to leave the chapel. Under duress." "Perhaps." He moved to a shelf and selected a book, handing it to me. "You might find this interesting. It's about choice and fate, freedom within constraint. Rather relevant to your situation, I think." I looked down at the volume, a rare edition of Jane Eyre. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Mr. Vitale asked me to tell you that your belongings have arrived," Thomas continued. "Maria has arranged them in your room. If you need anything else, please don't hesitate to ask." He left me alone with my thoughts and Charlotte Bronte's words about another woman trapped in another powerful man's house. My room had indeed been transformed in my absence. My clothes hung in the closet alongside the new ones. My laptop sat on the desk. My books, photos, even the silly ceramic cat figurine my mother had given me for my birthday were arranged carefully around the space. The sight of my possessions in this alien environment sent an unexpected wave of emotion through me. They looked small here, cheap almost, against the luxury of Alessio's world. Yet they were mine, tangible reminders of the life I'd had before yesterday. Among the items was my phone, which I grabbed eagerly, dead, of course. I found the charger and plugged it in, waiting impatiently for it to power on. When it did, notifications flooded the screen, missed calls, texts, voicemails, most from Daniel, growing increasingly desperate, several from my mother, a few from concerned friends who'd been at the wedding. I opened my mother's most recent message. "Emma, please just let me know you're safe. I understand why you're angry with me. We need to talk. There's so much I never told you." I typed a quick reply. "I'm safe. With Vitale. We'll call when I can." Daniel's messages I deleted without reading. Whatever lies or pleas he had for me, I wasn't interested. As I scrolled through the notifications, I noticed something odd. Several missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, all from this morning. As I stared at the screen, it lit up with another incoming call from an unknown number. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. "Hello? Emma Parker?" A man's voice, unfamiliar. "My name is Detective James Harmon. I'm trying to reach you regarding the incident at St. Cecilia's Chapel yesterday." My pulse quickened. "What incident?" "There was an altercation during your wedding ceremony," he said. "A groomsman was seriously injured. We're investigating the matter and need your statement." Alessio's distraction, apparently, had been more violent than he'd implied. I wasn't in the chapel when it happened," I said carefully. "I'd stepped outside for some air, so I've been told," the detective replied, a note of skepticism in his voice. "Your fiancé says you left willingly with Alessio Vitale. Is that correct?" A warning bell sounded in my head. How did the police know Alessio's name? And why would Daniel admit I'd left willingly? "Who did you say you were again?" I asked, stalling. "Detective Harmon, Organized Crime Division." A slight pause. "Ms. Parker, are you being held against your will? If you're in danger, there are ways we can help you." Understanding dawned. This wasn't about the wedding incident at all. This was about Alessio. "I'm fine," I said firmly. "I chose to leave my wedding. I'm staying with a friend until things settle down." "A friend," he repeated. "Alessio Vitale is a known associate of organized crime elements in this city. He's not someone you want as a friend." "Thank you for your concern," I said, keeping my voice steady. "But, as I said, I'm fine. Is there anything else?" "We'd still like to take your formal statement about yesterday's events," he pressed. "Could you come to the station? Or we could meet somewhere you feel comfortable." "I'll have to get back to you," I replied. "I'm still processing everything that happened, of course." His tone softened. "Here's my direct number. Call any time, day or night, if you need help. And Ms. Parker, be careful who you trust." I ended the call, my mind racing. Was this a legitimate police inquiry, or something more sinister? In Alessio's world, I imagined the line between law enforcement and enemies was often blurred. I needed to tell Alessio about the call, But he wasn't here, and I realized with sudden clarity that I had no way to contact him directly. For all his claims of protection and care, he hadn't given me his phone number or any means of reaching him in an emergency. I was contemplating my next move when a knock came at the door. "Miss Emma?" Maria's voice. "Mr. Vitale has returned. He asks if you would join him in the garden for tea." Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by annoyance at my own reaction. I shouldn't be glad to see the man who had effectively kidnapped me, no matter how willing that kidnapping might have been. "I'll be down in a few minutes," I called back. I changed quickly into a simple dress I found among my own clothes, applied minimal makeup, and headed downstairs. A different staff member led me through the house and out onto a stone terrace overlooking meticulously landscaped gardens. Alessio stood with his back to me, hands clasped behind him, surveying the property like a king his kingdom. He'd shed his suit jacket in the afternoon warmth, and the white shirt he wore accentuated the breadth of his shoulders, the lean strength of his frame. He turned as I approached, his dark eyes taking me in with that same unsettling intensity. "Emma, I trust you found everything to your satisfaction." "My belongings, yes. Thank you." I took the seat he indicated at a small table set for two. "Though I'm curious how your people got into my apartment." He smiled slightly. "I have keys to many places in this city." "Of course you do." I accepted the cup of tea he poured for me. "I received an interesting phone call today." His expression didn't change, but I sensed a sudden alertness in him. "Oh?" "From a Detective Harmon, Organized Crime Division." I watched him carefully. He seemed very concerned about my well-being. Alessio set down his cup with deliberate precision. What exactly did Detective Harmon want? Officially, a statement about the incident at the chapel. I met his gaze steadily. Unofficially, I think he was fishing for information about you. "Harmon has a particular interest in my family," Alessio said after a moment. "Has had for years, never with much success." He implied I might be in danger. Something hardened in Alessio's expression. "The only danger to you right now would be speaking with the detective. Is that a threat?" "A fact," he replied simply. "Harmon doesn't care about your welfare, Emma. You're just a potential way to get to me, like I was for Daniel," I observed bitterly. Alessio's eyes softened fractionally. "Not quite the same situation." "No?" I challenged. "Both of you using me because of a family name I didn't even know was mine. Tell me the difference." "The difference," he said quietly, "is that I never lied to you about who I am or what I want." The days blended together in Alessio's world, a strange limbo of luxury and constraint. A gilded cage, as the novels would say, though the bars were largely of my own making. I could have left, technically. The contract guaranteed my freedom to walk away after a year, but even now, just 2 weeks in, I understood there would be no truly walking away from Alessio Vitale. We'd fallen into an odd routine. Breakfasts alone in my room, occasional lunches together when his business allowed, dinners that became increasingly less awkward as we navigated our peculiar arrangement. He never pushed, never demanded, never so much as touched me beyond the occasional brush of fingers when passing a dish or document. Yet I felt his attention constantly, his dark eyes tracking my movements, assessing my moods, learning me in a way Daniel never had. "You're restless," Alessio observed one evening as I picked at my dessert, a delicate confection I couldn't appreciate. "I can't stay locked in this house forever," I replied. "I need something. Purpose, work." He considered this, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "What did you do before?" "I was an editor at a small publishing house." I smiled wryly. Not very glamorous, but I loved it. "Why can't you continue?" I stared at him. "Because everyone thinks I'm either kidnapped, having a nervous breakdown, or dead in a ditch somewhere? Because I can't exactly waltz back into my old life after disappearing from my own wedding? Those are problems with solutions," he said simply. "If you wish to work, arrangements can be made." "What kind of arrangements?" I asked, suspicious. "Legitimate ones." Alessio set down his glass. "I own shares in several businesses, including a publishing group. I could make inquiries." The offer surprised me. "You'd do that?" "I told you before. Your choices may be constrained, but they are yours." His gaze was steady. "I have no desire to keep you prisoner, Emma. Only safe." "Safe from what, exactly?" "Detective Harmon keeps calling. He seems to think you're the danger." Something cold flickered in Alessio's eyes. "Harmon is a persistent man, but persistence without wisdom is just stubbornness." "Is that a threat against a police officer?" I asked, only half joking. "An observation." Alessio's expression softened slightly. "Not everyone who wears a badge is honorable, Emma. Not everyone who breaks laws is evil. The world has more shades than that." "So enlighten me," I challenged, emboldened by 2 weeks of these careful conversations. "What exactly do you do that has the organized crime division so interested in you?" For a long moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. Then he leaned forward, his voice dropping. "My family has controlled certain aspects of this city's economy for generations," he said quietly. "Some legal, some less so. When my father died, I inherited both sides of that legacy. I've spent the past decade legitimizing what can be legitimized and minimizing harm in what cannot." "Minimizing harm," I repeated skeptically. "There will always be gambling, Emma, always prostitution, always drugs. The question is whether these things happen in the shadows, with no rules or protection for the vulnerable, or whether they happen under supervision, with certain standards." It was the most forthright he'd been about his business, and I found myself unsettlingly interested. "And you enforce these standards?" "I try." His gaze was unflinching. "I'm not a good man by conventional measures. I've done things I can never confess, even to you, but I protect what's mine, and I keep my word." The intensity of his stare made me look away first. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because you asked," he replied simply. "And because tomorrow night I'm hosting a gathering here. Business associates, political figures, legitimate partners. I would like you to attend, as my guest." My heart skipped. "You want to present me to your world?" "I want you to see that my world isn't entirely what you fear it to be." His voice softened. "You don't have to decide now, but we both knew I would go. Curiosity had always been my weakness." The black dress he provided for the event was nothing like the simple one from my first night. This was a statement piece, deep midnight silk that flowed like water, with a neckline that hinted rather than revealed, and a back that dipped just low enough to be daring without crossing into inappropriate. Diamonds glittered at my throat and ears. "Not gifts," Alessio had clarified, "but loans from the family collection." "You look beautiful," he said when I descended the stairs, his voice rough with something I pretended not to recognize. "Thank you." I smoothed the silk nervously. "So do you." "Handsome, I mean." He did. The tuxedo fit him perfectly, highlighting the strength in his shoulders, the lean power of his frame. His dark hair was swept back, emphasizing the sharp angles of his face. He looked dangerous and elegant, like a predator dressed for the opera. "There are some things you should know," Alessio said quietly as he offered me his arm. "Everyone here tonight knows who you are, or rather, who your family was. They'll have expectations." "What kind of expectations?" I asked, trepidation building. "That you're mine," he said simply. "My protection, my responsibility, my possession," I supplied, an edge to my voice. His eyes flashed. "Partner, they'll expect the heir to Thomas Calloway to understand our world, our ways, to be worthy of the Vitale name." "I'm not taking your name," I reminded him, even as my pulse quickened at the implication. The faintest smile touched his lips. "Not yet, perhaps." The grand ballroom I hadn't yet explored was transformed for the evening. Soft lighting, elegant floral arrangements, staff circulating with champagne and hors d'oeuvres. About 50 guests mingled, their conversation creating a gentle hum beneath classical music from a string quartet in the corner. As we entered, a subtle shift rippled through the room. Conversations paused, glances turned our way, expressions ranging from curiosity to calculation to outright hostility. I kept my chin high, grateful for Alessio's steady presence beside me. "Smile," he murmured, his lips barely moving. "They're watching for weakness." "Is that how you see me?" I whispered back. "A weakness?" His hand tightened slightly on mine. "Never. but they might, until you prove otherwise. The next hours were a blur of introductions, careful conversations, and political undercurrents I barely understood. Alessio never left my side, a protective shadow that both comforted and constrained. I met mayors and judges, business tycoons and society matrons, all of whom treated Alessio with a deference that bordered on fear. "Emma Parker," a familiar voice said behind me as I stood at the refreshment table, or should I say Emma Calloway now. I turned to find Detective Harmon, oddly out of place in his formal wear, yet carrying himself with confidence. My eyes sought Alessio across the room, finding him deep in conversation with an elderly man. "Detective," I said carefully. "I didn't expect to see you here. I'm full of surprises." His smile didn't reach his eyes, like finding the missing bride from last month's society wedding scandal playing hostess at a Vitale gathering. "I'm hardly playing hostess," I replied, keeping my voice even. "And I wasn't missing. I left. With a known crime figure," he pointed out. "Under suspicious circumstances." "Is this why you're here? To harass me at a private event?" His expression hardened. "I'm here because even men like Vitale need allies in law enforcement. I'm one of the few who can't be bought, which makes me both useful and dangerous to him." Something in his tone made me reassess him. "You sound almost like you respect him." "I respect what he is," Harmon admitted. "He's smarter than his father was, more subtle. Less blood, more business. Still a criminal, but a criminal with principles. Then why are you so interested in me?" The detective studied me for a long moment. "Because you're either his victim or his accomplice, Ms. Parker, and I haven't decided which yet. Perhaps I'm neither," I countered. "Perhaps I'm just a woman making the best of a complicated situation. There are no neutrals in Vitale's world," Harmon said softly. "You're either with him or against him. And those against him tend to disappear." Before I could respond, I felt a presence at my back. Alessio, materializing as if summoned by our conversation. "Detective," he greeted Harmon, his tone pleasant, but with an underlying edge. "Enjoying the party? Just getting acquainted with your guest." Harmon's gaze shifted between us, assessing. "Ms. Parker and I have had several phone conversations, but this is our first meeting in person." "How fortunate for both of you," Alessio replied smoothly, his hand coming to rest lightly on the small of my back. "If you'll excuse us, Detective, I need to introduce Emma to the governor's wife." As we moved away, I felt Harmon's eyes following us. "He's dangerous," I murmured. "Yes," Alessio agreed, surprising me. "Men with principles always are." The evening continued, a careful dance of power and politics that left me exhausted. By midnight, when the last guests were departing, I felt as though I'd run a marathon. "You did well," Alessio said as we stood in the foyer, bidding farewell to an elderly couple who seemed particularly fond of him. "Better than I expected." "Thanks for the vote of confidence," I replied dryly. When we were finally alone, he turned to me fully. "I mean it, Emma. You navigated a room full of sharks without a single misstep. That's impressive." "I'm a quick study," I said, reaching up to remove the diamond earrings, "and I've had practice pretending to belong in worlds that aren't mine." His hand caught mine, stopping me. "This world could be yours, if you wanted it." The intensity in his eyes made my breath catch. "Alessio, I know what you think of me," he said quietly. "What you think of all this, but I've watched you these past weeks. You're not as appalled as you pretend to be. You're curious," he continued, "about the power, the danger, the things I could show you." He wasn't wrong, and that terrified me more than anything he could have said or done. Some treacherous part of me had begun to see beyond the monster to the man. Complicated, dangerous, but also intelligent, principled in his own way, and undeniably magnetic. "I should go to bed," I said, pulling my hand from his. "It's late." His eyes held mine for a long moment before he nodded. "Of course. We'll talk tomorrow." But tomorrow brought chaos instead of clarity. I woke to shouting, the thunder of footsteps in the corridor outside my room. Before I could process what was happening, Maria burst in, her usually composed face tight with fear. "Miss Emma, quickly," she urged. "You need to come with me now." "What's happening?" I asked, scrambling out of bed. "Police raid," she said grimly. Someone tipped them off about documents in Mr. Vitale's office. My blood ran cold. Alessio is handling it, she said firmly. But he wants you hidden. Now. She led me through a series of corridors I'd never seen before, down a narrow staircase, and into what appeared to be a service tunnel beneath the house. We emerged eventually in a small garden house at the far edge of the property. Wait here, Maria instructed. There's food, water, everything you need. Don't leave for any reason until Mr. Vitale or I come for you. Understand? I nodded, too stunned to argue. As she left, locking the door behind her, I sank onto a small sofa, my mind racing. Was this Harmon's doing? Had last night's conversation been a prelude to this morning's raid? Hours passed in tense silence. Through the windows, I could see police vehicles at the main house, officers coming and going. No sign of Alessio. It was nearly dusk when the door finally opened. Alessio stood there, his expression grim, a cut above his eye partially dried with blood. Are you hurt? I asked, moving toward him instinctively. I'm fine, he said, though the tightness around his mouth suggested otherwise. But we need to leave. Now, what happened? Someone betrayed me, he said simply. Harmon found enough to bring charges. Not enough to make them stick, but enough to cause problems. So we're running? I asked, disbelieving. Temporarily relocating, he corrected. I have properties they don't know about. Places will be safe until my lawyers handle this. We, I repeated. Alessio, I'm not a criminal. I don't need to run. His expression hardened. You're associated with me now, Emma. In their eyes, that's enough. If you stay, they'll use you to get to me. Like you used me to get to Daniel? I couldn't help asking. Pain flashed across his face. Is that what you think? That any of this was about Daniel? Wasn't it? You said yourself he tried to use me as leverage. He was the excuse, not the reason. Alessio interrupted, his voice rough. I would have found another way to claim you eventually. He just accelerated the timeline. The stark honesty stunned me into silence. I've wanted you since you were 16 years old, he continued, taking a step toward me. Not because of some blood debt, though that gave me the right. Not to spite Foster, because when I saw you that night at Tony's, standing there with fire in your eyes even as they fired you unjustly, I knew you were meant to be mine. That's disturbing, I managed, though my heart was racing. It's the truth, he replied simply. I stayed away while you grew up. I protected you from a distance. I made sure you had opportunities, choices. But I always knew this day would come, and now you expect me to run away with you? Leave everything behind? I expect you to survive, he said flatly. Which means coming with me now. The choice is yours, but the consequences will be real either way. I looked at him. This dangerous, complicated man who had upended my life, who had been watching over me for years without my knowledge, who now offered both protection and prison in the same breath. If I go with you, I said slowly, what happens after? If your lawyers fix this, if we come back, what then? Something softened in his gaze. Then we continue as we were. You working, if you wish, living here or in your own place if you prefer. Protected, but as free as possible. And if I want more? The question surprised even me. Alessio went very still. More? I took a step toward him, closing the distance between us. I've spent 2 weeks observing you, Alessio, learning your world, seeing past the facade to the man beneath. And what do you see? He asked, his voice low. Someone dangerous, I admitted. Someone who's done terrible things, who lives by a code I don't fully understand, but also someone who keeps his word, who protects what's his, who... I hesitated, then plunged ahead. Who looks at me like I'm the answer to a question he's been asking his whole life? His breath caught audibly. Emma, I'm not saying I love you, I clarified quickly. I'm not even saying I fully trust you, but I'm curious about what this could be, given time. The tension in him was palpable, like a predator holding itself in check. Don't say things you don't mean, not now. I never say things I don't mean, I replied, finding strength in the truth. I'll go with you. Not just to survive, but to see where this leads. One condition, though. Name it, he said instantly. No more secrets. No more half-truths. If we're in this together, then we're truly together. I want to know everything. The businesses, the dangers, all of it. For a long moment, he simply stared at me, as though trying to read the truth in my eyes. Then he nodded once, decisive. Everything, he agreed. No secrets between us. His hand reached up, fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that belied his dangerous reputation. But you should know, once you're truly part of my world, there's no going back. I leaned into his touch, acknowledging the warning and accepting it. I think I crossed that line the moment I left the chapel with you. His smile was both tender and predatory. Perhaps you did. The sound of vehicles approaching broke the moment. Alessio tensed, moving to the window to peer through the curtains. We need to go, he said urgently. Now. As we slipped out the back door toward a car waiting beyond the garden wall, I felt an unexpected sense of rightness. Not happiness exactly. There were too many complications, too many moral compromises for simple happiness. But purpose, direction. I had spent my life seeking safety, normality, protection from the chaos of the world. With Daniel, that search had led me toward a life built on lies. With Alessio, paradoxically, it led toward a dangerous truth, that sometimes the greatest safety comes from aligning with the danger, not running from it. As the city lights faded behind us, and Alessio's hand found mine in the darkness of the car, I realized I had made my choice long before today. Perhaps even before the wedding, in some unconscious corner of my soul that recognized the inevitability of this path. I wasn't just running away, I was running toward something, a life of complexity and danger, yes, but also of honesty and protection, of passion and purpose. Where are we going? I asked softly. Alessio's fingers tightened around mine. Home, he said simply, a different one. But ours. Ours. The word settled between us, weighted with promise and peril. This wasn't the life I'd planned, the future I'd imagined. It was something darker, more complex, more alive. And as we drove into the gathering night, leaving behind the wreckage of my old life, I found myself anticipating the one ahead, not with fear, but with a strange, fierce curiosity about the woman I might become at Alessio Vitale's side. Not his possession, not his victim, his equal in time, his partner, his